Hello, and thank you for coming back for another video in my series, Start from Scratch with the Boss RC600 Loop Station. This is video number 9 in my series, and in the last video we went into the loop parameters and we made a few changes to the settings and configurations that control how the 6 tracks operate. As a quick review, let's have a look at where we were. In the loop menu, we went into track. And in this menu, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens of settings for each and every track. That is all for track 1. You have to go through each track individually and go through all 5 of those screens, one track at a time. So there's quite a few settings that you will have to go through in order to finish just the parameters in the track sub-menu. And then we went into the record menu and the play menu, and we set further loop settings. And these ones you only have to go through once, and they are more of a system setting for this particular memory slot. And in this video today, we're going to go and start populating the foot switches on this RC600. All of them on board have been turned off with the exception of foot switch number 7 on all 3 modes. It is a mode selector control so that I can get to modes 1, 2, and 3. Also, what I've set up is an all start stop command on switch number 9 on mode 1. And so we are able to stop and clear any of the tracks. On my external foot switches, I have track decrease. Let's go back and exit that screen so you can follow along here. I have track decrease, I have track increase. And what that allows me to do is I can select any track that I want. As I go up and down, I can move to track 1, track 2, track 3, and having a closer look, this dot tells you what track you're going to be acting on. And so with your next press of a switch, you can impact any particular track, or you can have a setting that affects how the machine operates. On the other FS6 pedal, I have record play and I have a stop clear. So I have navigation and I have rudimentary controls for recording and stopping tracks and clearing tracks. And so now we're going to start populating the rest of these foot switches on board the RC600. Let's have a quick look at the parameter guide, and we will go through that section for control functions and for assigns. This is the RC600 parameter guide, and you can get it from the Boss website at the exact same page where you get firmware updates, Tone Studio, and whatnot. Please take note, in the middle of the page you'll see a little red block here that says version 1.3 for me, and what that means is that this version of the parameter guide has been written for version 1.3 firmware. As new firmware comes out, they may or may not update the parameter guide depending on how extensive the updates were. And when version 1.3 came out, it added some new features, and so they wrote a new parameter guide. Make sure you have the current parameter guide. If you don't have that, then you should absolutely go and download it because you are going to need it. It's a complete breakdown of everything in all of the menus in the RC600. Scrolling down this list, you're going to be walking through every item on all of the menus, and we're going to go down to page 14. We're going to skip over all of this, and you should review it all when you get your own copy of this guide, because it's very, very eye-opening. Anyway, control function is where we're going to look, and scrolling down a little bit further, starting with the first option being off, and that's currently what all of my foot switches on board the RC600 on all three modes, that's what they're all set to, with the exception of foot switch number 7 on all three modes is set to scroll through the different modes. And I think there's an all stop in there as well. Anyway, through this list, every command that's on here pertains to functions in regards to either a particular track, tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and there's a whole list of things available for each individual track that you can assign to any of the foot switches. Each foot switch, of course, is entitled to have one control function on each mode. So basically, each foot switch can have 3 different commands, one on each mode. And we're going to, if we can't find a control function that is what I am after for a particular foot switch, and that's very common, you could also look in another place for other options. Anyway, part of this list pertains to current track. You'll see current track, record play 2. And what that is, it's a record play function. There are several versions of it to choose from, and that's the case for many of the controls that are here. When it says current track, that is a control that I would use in conjunction with using what I have set up on my external foot switches, and that is to be able to scroll up and down through the 6 tracks individually. So I'm going to be looking for anything from the current track portion of this list, or something for more of a functionality of the whole memory location sort of a command. Something like all start stop, or possibly all clear, tempo half, tempo double is here, tempo revert, and those kind of commands are available as well as control functions. I won't be using anything though in regards to drums or percussions. That sort of thing is going to be used in a different memory for my purposes. Anyway, from this list, I'm going to select a bunch of things that I think would be handy to have set up on my foot switches. The next section pertains to the external foot switches, and it's essentially the same list for controls, your FS6s, FS7s, if you're using FS5Us. This is really the same list, but it goes to one of those pedals. And past that, there is a list of commands available for expression pedals, and we will look at that in a future video. If it's not on the list of control functions though, don't worry, because there's another section called Assign, and there are 16 different assigns available for you to use. Maybe think of an assign as a wildcard command, an extra command that you could apply to any of the foot switches. It can either act on a foot switch press, or it can act on a state of a track going from record to overdub, or from play to stop, or from from stop to record, or you can act on MIDI signals that are incoming from other devices. So there's a lot of ways to use an assign, and what causes it to take action could be stepping on the pedal, or a MIDI command, or other actions that happen behind the scenes. Now, target is a very long list, and that is the list of commands that any of these assigns can do upon receiving any of these input signals. So on this list, again, there are commands that pertain to individual tracks or to current track, and that's where I'm going to be looking primarily, or all stop, all start, or you can increase effects banks, you can do all sorts of things. There's a huge list available for assigns. A lot of it has to do with input effects, parameters, and track effects, and those parameters, there's several pages that just pertain to effects, and then there are some other commands as well further down this list. And we're going to look at that momentarily. I'm going to go through this list and choose a few that I think would be handy. So now I think I've come up with a short list of commands that I would like to have access to whenever I start off a new song. I personally think that on mode 1, that's the best place to set some configurations that would allow me to change the functionality of this machine. It's already been set up in regards to how each individual track works. That happens in the menus when you press loop and go into track, record and play menus. So it's already set to work the way that I want to behind the scenes. So the functionality of it, though, can be adjusted on the fly, and one of the parameters I can turn on and off is auto record. So it's available as an assign function, and so I would turn off this control function and use an assign instead, and that's one of the reasons I turned everything off on this RC, so that you could see how awesomely programmable this can be. Auto record, I think we all know what it's for and how it works. Of course, it'll allow me to hit the record button, but it won't start recording until I start to play, which is very convenient sometimes, especially on track 1. It might be the only time I need to use it. And this function, you probably want to turn it off again by pressing the button a second time after you've used it and you don't need it anymore. Another function that I think I would love to have access to on the fly, especially on mode 1, is dub mode. And what I can do with this function, it's an assign as well, and you've seen in the previous video that each and every track I can set how it overdubs. And that doesn't mean to go from record to overdub to play, or from record to play to overdub. What this actually does, it changes how overdub works. So regardless of your record action that you've already determined elsewhere, what this actually allows you to do is, let's say you're using overdub and you're playing the track and you're going to overdub a new layer over top of it. Regular overdub adds your current playing to what's already recorded. If I were to press this to go to replace 1, then it would allow me to instead play the track, play some new material, and at the end it would replace that track with the new material and get rid of what was there previously. And of course, replace number 2 would allow me to record over top of what's already been recorded on any particular track without playing that track. So each way of using overdub mode has some interesting implications, and it would be definitely something to fool around with, experiment with, and get to know very well, because it does open up a lot of doors. And if I'm going to use dub mode creatively, something that should be right there available with it is something called mark set. Now that is a greatly underappreciated function, and what it does, it allows me to set a place in a particular series of overdubs on any given track, and it would allow me to later on return to the state the track was in after I've recorded over top or replaced anything or overwritten anything using the overdubbing process, regardless of whichever dub mode I'm using. So I could use dub mode, replace what's currently recorded with something else completely, and then go back to that previous state using either record back or mark back. So these four functions together are ridiculously powerful and really open up an awful lot of options, opportunity to get really experimental and creative, and save you an awful lot of resources by letting you continue to use your other tracks for other purposes. You can do an awful lot of interesting things just on one single track with these four buttons, even with just these three: mark set, mark back, and mark record. Even with just those three, you can still have an awful lot of fun, but when you throw in the ability to change how overdub works, really opens up an awful lot of doors. And I'm going to go over that in a different video, and you'll be able to find that on my channel in the next short while. Anyway, remember we're only on mode 1. And so when I'm creating tracks and getting started in a song, I can change how dub mode works. I can set a marker in my overdubbing process so that I can return to a previous state at any time. But these two functions I think I would prefer to have on mode 2, which is where I would be switching my RC600 to after I've got some tracks established and started off, and I'm getting underway with my song. These two commands are probably better placed on mode 2, so I'm going to put them aside for now. And instead, on mode 1, I think I would like the ability to change a track to be one shot or not one shot. And the thing is with that is, let's say I captured a track when I'm playing a song, and I wanted that song, it's got 2 verses and then a chorus, 2 verses and then a chorus, and let's say I wanted to capture the first run through the verse and have that play one time, or not one time, and maybe I wanted to continue multiple times. I could use this button to change how it plays back any of those single mode tracks that I've captured already. So that is a great function to have available as I am going. It may end up on mode 2 as well with record back and mark back, but for now I'm going to leave it here and we'll see what else we can come up with. Now when I'm starting off a song, sometimes I would like to be able to fool around with some sort of experimentally kind of a sounds, and I think reverse is a greatly underused function as well. It's a regular control function, and so that it can be assigned to any foot switch, and I could have that foot switch also do other things. And if I were to use that, I might want to have something called input through activated. And what input through does, it actually mutes all of my inputs so that they don't go straight out to the PA, but I can still capture any recording from any of those instruments or microphones. So it seems to mute everything here, and if you didn't know, it actually does allow you to record still to any track. So if I were to use the reverse function and this, I could actually hit a chord and let it ring out for several seconds. It'll not be heard by anyone, and when the track starts to play, it's there and captured, and it is nicely prominent. I would then probably want to turn off input through later because I wouldn't be able to do anything otherwise, and so I may have to not have that on the same button. I could have it on a separate button, or I could use control function or assigns to allow me to reactivate my inputs when the track goes into play mode. And that's another option that I think I could do. So when I press the button, mutes all the inputs, I can record everything, and when it switches to play mode, it would be another assign that I could use to deactivate this function. So it's quite versatile behind the scenes if I wanted to go that route. And I may leave that there because in the next video I could show you how I do that. Now, another very awesome thing to have on your pedal board somewhere is the ability to mute your microphone. Now, I'm only using one microphone. Some people are using two microphones, and you could mute them both simultaneously or one or the other. Now, some people are using a mic splitter to use one microphone across both inputs so that they can route one to be straight through and never get recorded to a track, and the other one only goes to a track. And that is another interesting topic that many people are using, and I will show you that in a separate video. But that would entail using an assign for mic mute for one of the microphones and this function for mic mute on the other microphone. So you're using an assign and a control function to mute your microphones, and they're offset to each other so that one gets muted and the other gets unmuted each time you press this button. They alternate, which is really a cool thing to be able to do as well. Now, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to be muting one microphone, mic 1, and I believe I could also mute my guitar input. Would be something that I would also like to have access to on mode 1. Let's say I have to deal with a problem off stage, hardware malfunction, or a person on the side of the stage, who knows what. Maybe I broke a string or two and I need to swap my guitar and I want to unplug. So a mic mute, instrument mute, set on one single foot switch would allow me to safely deal with whatever problems come up during a show. And that leaves me with one last button. And I'm a little bit undecided on what to do with it. I'm not going to be using any onboard rhythms or MIDI inputs or anything, and so this is free to do something else. And I will probably leave it unassigned for now, but probably it'll end up with some sort of an effect, and it'll allow me to use effects on say the guitar or the microphone, who knows. But this is only mode 1, and as you can see, for the most part, all of these functions are changing the way that the machine operates rather than starting to record, move on to the next track. That all happens here already. So all these foot switches allow me to do everything else. And now I'm thinking in terms of always starting off with track 1, track 2, and track 3. So I'm just navigating numerically up the ladder, creating my rhythms, and then I have a couple of tracks that I can make verses and choruses and whatnot if I wish. I may be turning one of those first 3 tracks into a single mode track, just like 4 and 5, so that I could have 3 parts of a song that I can loop and just use 2 for my rhythm section. At any rate, there are multiple ways to go, all sorts of options available, and this is only one of many that I'm going to try to show you. So if you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. It sure does help my channel. You can buy me a coffee if you wish at buymeacoffee.com/themichaelsphere. It is on the link in the video description. So if you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great night. Bye now.